Really quick, one of those things that dawns on you after you leave the pulpit, and you're like, oh man, I missed it. I should have said that. Proverbs. When Solomon writes, don't add to the words of God, or don't take away from the words of God. He's writing at the end of the United Kingdom. Yes, I said that. But think about the providential placement of Proverbs in the Old Testament. It's after Ezra and Nehemiah, isn't it? It seals all the way up to the return from Babylon. When God puts it in there, it's encompassing the entire Old Testament. So I just thought that was super cool to point out. John chapter 5. And as we get into this, I want to point out the value of Scripture reading, of having someone like Austin stand up here and read it prior to me preaching it. Because if I remember it when I get to the text, I had one of those moments where he's reading and I'm listening and I'm thinking, ooh, I didn't see that part. Let's add that to it. And so the value of listening to someone else read the Word, the value of reading it yourself, yes, but I often talk about in the How to Study the Bible course that I do is one of the things we need to do is listen to other people read it. Because the inflection changes or whatever, the pause changes just a little bit and things register on us that we don't see when we read. Let's be honest, it's real easy just to check out and just see words on the page and we're blowing through them and not noticing. For that reason, I also emphasize read out loud, even to yourself, so that you're hearing it and you're having to focus on words. So John chapter 5, another day in the life of Jesus. Verse 1, John tells us it's a feast of the Jews. There's debate. Is it Passover? And some people are trying to make sure it's Passover, so they're counting the number of Passovers that he celebrates so that you can date things. Could be Pentecost because we've just had a Passover. It could be New Year. If the article is there, and there is evidence in the text that it's possible that it is the feast, then it's the Feast of Tabernacles. Regardless which one it is, what matters, and this is a point we've made earlier in the life of Jesus as we watched him, he's a good Jew. He is where he is supposed to be. He is about to go to battle with the Pharisees over custom. But what he does not do is alter the law in any way. He submits to it. He fulfills it to the fullest extent. So in verse 1, when the text opened up, he is where he is supposed to be. He is in Jerusalem. And we're told there that a note that John gives us is that there is a pool there. Now my text says Bethesda. The side margin adds Bethsaida or Bezatha as possibilities. Older translations, those were possibilities until 1960. In 1960, the copper scroll that was found at Qumran, one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, tells us that in their day it is Bethesda. And so we can understand that the reading should be Bethesda because that's what they were calling it and they were writing about it in those days. Literally means a place of outpouring, a place of mercy. And that's going to relate to two things in the story. It's going to relate to the original purpose of the pool and then the purpose that it is being used for in the days of Jesus. There are a lot of pools in Jerusalem and we've found them, we've dug them up, we've identified them, but there is only one, this one here, the one we're talking about in John 5, that is close to the sheep gate. And we have found this, we have excavated it. It has exactly what John says it has. It has porticos all the way around it. It has covered porches where they could walk and they could talk and they could sit in the shade, they could teach. And this is what it looks like excavated. And there are the steps or the landing where these people would gather to try to get into the water when it moved. Here's another image of it. And if you notice right here, there is a duct that controlled the flow of water. The stirring of the water. And they knew when it was scheduled. And so they would gather close to that time in hopes to catch it. Because their legend, their thought process was that it was an angel that was stirring that water and that it had miraculous powers at that time. Repeat very quickly, only one near the sheep gate. It's a double pool. It was designed for several reasons. They used it in the days of Jesus for ritual washing, for ritual baptism, but it's right by the sheep gate. By the way, the sheep gate later becomes Stephen's gate because historically that's where it's believed that he was stoned. Sheep gate, sheep pool, overflowing of mercy, outpouring of mercy. This is where, as the sheep are being brought into the gate, into the temple to be sacrificed, they washed the sheep in the pool. They cleansed them, they sanctified them, then they went through the gate to be offered. So an outpouring of God's mercy at this gate. Nehemiah chapter 3, verse 1 and 2. When the rebuilding takes place, this is the only gate. This is how important the sheep gate is to the temple. It's the only gate rebuilt by the high priest and his priests. And it's the only gate that as it's rebuilt is immediately consecrated. Why? Because when they go back to temple worship, when they go back to making their sacrifices, they have to be able to wash the sheep, bring them into the gate that has been consecrated, and then offer them as their offerings. It's the first one rebuilt, by the way, in Nehemiah. Verses 3 and 4. Because of the stirring of the water, because of the legend that went with it, and John doesn't comment as to whether or not the legend's true. Whether or not if you got into the water, there was some type of miraculous healing that God provided. John just comments that that's what's going on. But it's where people gathered because of that legend. And they would wait on the stirring of the water. Probably, as I said, comes about because they open the duct and allow the water to flow. It would raise and lower the level of the water. It would refresh the water that was in it. And there's a man there. As Jesus comes by, notice the observance. Notice the fact that Jesus pays attention to people. Jesus pays attention to what's going on around him. It would have been real easy. Let's be honest. We do it. That little guy that sits outside of Walmart right there behind what used to be PNC Banks, now the water department. We ignore him when we drive by. Look the other direction, don't make eye contact with him. The guy standing at the side of the interstate and we're exiting. We're reading a McDonald's sign for the first time in 30 years because he's standing over there and McDonald's is that direction. It would have been real easy for Jesus to walk by the pool and go, I really don't feel like stopping and talking to people. I really don't feel like healing somebody today. But notice that's not the character of Jesus. And that's really what we want to nail down in this story, is he is walking by this pool and he is taking notice of the people there. Specifically a man that has been sick for 38 years. Now, not necessarily lying there all 38 years. It could have been a progressive thing and he finally is there. It could be that he was sick somewhere else. It could be that he's laying there all 38 years. It very simply tells us that he has been sick for 38 years. And as the story progresses, we figure out there's some type of lameness in this sickness. He's not able to get into the pool as quickly as everybody else can. Now notice when he explains the situation, he says there's nobody to get me in there, but as I'm coming to the pool, so he can make some progress on his own. It's just not as rapid. So he's not completely incapable of mobility. But 38 years. He's been imprisoned by his body in some way. And Jesus takes notice of him. And Jesus begins a conversation with him. Do you really want to get well? Do you want to get well? You know, that's not probably the question we ask. Because to us the answer is obvious. Absolutely. I want to get well. And I've heard and I've read, well, he's testing him. Does he really want to get well, or is he content where he is? And I dealt with it when we were in the prison system working as chaplains. There are some prisoners who cannot stay out of prison because they do not want to. The day they get out, they will rob the nearest liquor store and stand on the curb and wait on the cops to come get them because they've got 3 squares and a place to sleep and etc. And so it's possible, if he's testing him, that, or are you just comfortable? You know, you really don't have to hold down a job. You don't have a whole lot of responsibility in life. You can come and hang out by the pool every day and pretend you want to get well. But I don't really think that's where he's going because of the man's answer. I lean more towards Jesus wants to hear him voice it. Do you want to get well? Yes, I want to get well. Why am I here? Why would I be sitting at this pool if I didn't go to well? I could have stayed at home. I didn't have to drag myself up here. I didn't have to beg my neighbors to take me to the pool. I could have just stayed at home. And then in verse 7, as he asks the question, the man answers. And it's not an excuse. When he says, I don't have any way to get into the pool, he's not making excuses for not getting well. He's saying, absolutely, I want to get well. I just do not have the opportunity. I'm convinced that's the case because if he really does not want to get well, and he is not in that sentence voicing a desire to get well, Jesus doesn't force himself on anyone. Jesus says, okay, you can just continue to lie on your mat if you want to. But this man has reached the end of the road. I haven't gotten well in 38 years, and now I'm lying by the pool, and I can't get in there. So there's no other option for me. So Jesus being Jesus, no preamble. Stand up, pack up your belongings, and walk. And there is immediate and complete healing. Think about, for lack of any other way to describe it, the double miracle that's taken place. He is given the ability to walk, but he is also given the ability to do it immediately. He doesn't go to therapy. He's not getting stronger. We sit down for 15 minutes and cross our legs, and our legs fall asleep. And we're walking around dragging one leg behind us and stomping it and trying to get the needles out of it. We get in a car and we ride for a couple of hours, and we get out of the car and we're barely moving. Break a leg, break a hip, replace a knee, and lay around for a couple of weeks and let atrophy set in. And we're barely moving. We're not locomoting very well. This man is immediate. I'm reminded of the other temple scene where the man jumps up and he's leaping. Multiple, in a sense, miracles taking place at the same time, or multiple steps in the miracle that take place at the same time. And it's complete. And he goes on about his business, but it creates a problem. Because Jesus, or John, notes what? It's the Sabbath. No work. And they call him on it. Hey, dude, you can't carry your pallet on the Sabbath. And the man responds, and this is one of the things I was noticing. I comment on it later on, but I noticed it again in a different way this time. The man notes the authorization that he has to carry his pallet. the man who healed me, the man who had the ability to reverse 38 years of time, authorized me to carry my pallet. That's why I'm carrying it. I have every right to carry my pallet because the one who told me to far exceeds anything that you can do or have done for me in 38 years. But he is infringing on their, notice this, traditions, their customs, their extra bindings, things we talked about this morning that they're adding that relate to the Sabbath. Interpretations of the Sabbath laws by the religious leaders of the day are extremely binding. You're limited in how far you can walk. You can limited in how much weight you can carry. You're limited in how far you can carry it. And notice in the text, because John's going to point it out, and you can also notice it in Mark chapter 2 and Mark chapter 3. This is the first real conflict between Jesus and the leaders. Even when he cleansed the temple, they asked him about his authority, but they really kind of dropped it after that. Remember Mark 2? 23 through 3:6, you got a lot of things going on. You have him healing the man that's lowered down through the roof. He's forgiving sins. And these guys, when they violate the Sabbath, quote, by threshing the grain between their hands, when they violate the Sabbath by healing the man's withered hand, they are more bothered by him in John chapter 5 telling the man to work on the Sabbath. They're more bothered by that than they are by the fact that he forgave sins. More bothered by that than the fact that he called Matthew there in Mark chapter 2 and 3. That the fasting rules that he applies to his disciples are not the same as what they thought ought to be applied. And so the explosion in Mark and the explosion in John both stem from what they see as Sabbath violations. The fact that he's going to call himself the Lord of the Sabbath is going to roll into that. They're going to pile on top of it. But before they get there, John is going to tell us they began persecuting him because of his Sabbath views. And then when he equates himself to God, it gets worse. It gets more heated. Verse 11. He answered them, "He who made me well was the one who said to me, 'Take up your pallet and walk.'" Well, who told you that in verse 12? According to their traditions, you take what God gave us in the Pentateuch, in the law of Moses. You then look up what they're binding on people. There were 39 categories of work that they were not allowed to do on the Sabbath. Number 39, you cannot carry a load from one dwelling to another. All right. So, number one, lame dude, you shouldn't have carried it from your house to here to look for healing. Number two, Jesus shouldn't have told you to pick it back up and take it home. And they're frantic about it. Well, the man who healed me told me I could. Who's that guy? Notice, what question do they ask? Who healed you? We need to see him. We need to see the power of God that can heal a man who's been lame for 38 years. We need to meet the guy with... Who's the guy that told you to carry your pallet? Their focus is on the mat. Jesus' focus at the pool was on the man. The leaders of their day that are supposed to be changing their lives cannot even see the man because he is carrying a mat. What does that say? When I look the other direction when the man is asking for my help, it means I don't see the man, I see that he's an inconvenience, or that he's dirty, or that he stinks, or that he's different than me. There are days in our lives that we are Pharisees all over without even realizing it. Not because we're binding extra stuff, but because we're inconvenienced by the mat, by the extra things going on around. And Jesus strips all of it away, and He's just seeing a man that is hurting, that He can help. And they're not focusing on the healing. They're not focusing on the man. They're missing the point entirely. But who told you you could carry your mat? They're missing this trifold of miracle. The ability to stand, the ability to walk, the ability to carry his mat. But all of those things, and the man hit on it, validate his authority. At other times, what do we see? When John is asking for validation and he's in prison, am I dying for the right reason? Go tell John what you have seen and what you have heard. Things that have never happened before. The lame walk, the blind see, the deaf hear, the dumb speak. Things are happening in their presence that have never happened before, and they're happening to validate who He is. The Pharisees can't handle it. By the way, still connecting some thoughts from Mark chapter 2, Jesus says the Sabbath was supposed to be a blessing, not a burden. Verse 28, Lord of even the Sabbath, in Mark chapter 2. Again, there's the issue. You're breaking our Sabbath, and you're saying you're in charge of our Sabbath. Chapter 3 and verse 4, as He's healing the man in Mark, He says, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath? And then remember that other text? You guys are going to go get your ox out of the ditch if it falls in, aren't you? What am I doing? Now then, who gave you the right to carry your mat? I don't know. Jesus avoids publicity. The last time He's in the temple, He didn't avoid the publicity. He cleared the temple out. It caused a little issue. It's not time for Him to go to the cross. And so when He heals this man, He just kind of slides into the crowd and disappears. Well, I don't know who told me. I just know He healed me. Verse 14, Jesus goes back to the temple and He bumps into the man. And of course, he recognizes him. And so he goes back to him and he talks to him again and he says, look, don't sin anymore. You've been made well. Things could get worse for you. Now understand in Scripture, there are times that a person's condition is directly connected to sin. And there are times that his condition is not. Jesus uses the same wording in John 8 and verse 11 with the woman caught in adultery. But there are times, chapter 9 and verse 2 of John, who sinned, this man or his parents? Jesus said, nobody. This has nothing to do with sin. This has to do with the glory of God. So I cannot read into verse 14 that this man's lame because of sin. What I can understand from that is Jesus very simply warning him, you could be a whole lot worse off than lame. You could be eternally lost. Now that you've been well, make sure you take care of your spiritual life also. Verse 15. Why go back and tell them who healed you? Text doesn't say. Maybe he wants to give Jesus credit. Hey, I figured out who healed me. It's Jesus. Maybe it's just because they ask and he felt a responsibility to go answer their question when he does get the answer. Maybe it's just because he probably thinks nothing of it. It's no big deal to him. Whatever the case is, he goes back and identifies Jesus, and that allows them to go from taking issue with the man and the mat to taking issue with Jesus and the mat. And verse 16, John says they launch an all-out campaign against him over the Sabbath. Over the fact that he gave the man permission to carry his mat. And so Jesus turns it on them and asks a question. By saying to them And check the reading. It's not a question, but it is a question. My Father is working until now, and I myself am working. In that response, he's basically saying, are you telling me that every seventh day of the week, my Father does nothing? Now, go all the way back to creation. 6 days God created, the seventh day He rested from His creation. Did God the Father do nothing on day 7? It says He rested from His creating. If He did nothing on day 7, our world flies apart. God holds it together. All right? So, every Sabbath day, God's not taking off in the sense that we think He's doing absolutely nothing. It's designed for man. It's designed for man to rest from his daily work. When He's giving those instructions under the law, what's He telling them not to do? Don't go gather firewood. Don't work. Don't go out and gather your food. I'm going to give you that on Friday. You collect enough for both days and do what I ask you to do. And just kind of take a break. But He's not saying just lie there in your filth and don't move for 24 hours. But even though that's one of the things Jesus is emphasizing, they're keying on the second part of it. I'm working too. Ooh, Jesus, you just equated yourself with the Father. And basically in verse 18 they go, oh no, He didn't. There's no way He just equated Himself with the Father. And all the way through John, the answer is absolutely yes. Over and over. Of all 4 Gospels, John is the one that continually nails it down. I am. Please get that connection. All right, we've worked our way through the story. What do we see? More like Jesus. If I'm going to be more like Him tomorrow than I am today, than I was when I woke up this morning, if I'm more like Him at the end of the day than I was when I woke up this morning, number one, let's go back and repeat the fact He's a good Jew. He's where He's supposed to be. Am I in worship when I'm supposed to be in worship? Am I in Bible study when I'm supposed to be in Bible study? Am I in prayer? Am I doing the things that make me a Christian? That identify me as a child of God? That project the light of Jesus through me on a daily basis? But then the other one in this story is the compassion over conformity. Over custom. Not law. He's not violating law. He's violating the things that they have added to the law. Do I see people more than I see custom, tradition, social circle, comfort, convenience? Can I see the hurt in other people's eyes? Can I see the fact that they are made in the image of God? And when we boil it all down, when we get down to the soup of humanity and we all stand before God together, we're made of the same stuff. And based on Matthew chapter 16 and so many other passages, it's either lost or it's saved. Can I see people as either lost or saved? Not dirty, not a different color, not as wealthy as me, not an inconvenience because I'm leaving Walmart and I have to get to this store and I have to get to that store and I have to get home and mow the grass before it rains. Can I see them as worth the time to put off everything else that's going on, to spend some time with them and fix what I can fix? Remember Matthew chapter 25. You've had an initial judgment when Jesus returns. Remember Thessalonians, He's coming back with flaming fire, separating those who have obeyed the gospel and those who have not. You've had an initial separation. But then when you get to Matthew 25, the only dividing factor in Matthew 25 is what? Did you give me a drink? Did you feed me? Did you come visit me? So that's outside of the gospel. That is a, quote, secondary judgment for the people of God who claim to have obeyed the gospel. So do I see in people the opportunity to extend the glass of water? To offer a meal, to give a ride. And certainly, look, prudence has to exist in our world. If you're a single female woman, I guess that's the only way you could be a woman, right? That's really confusing because of a conversation we had at lunch today. I was told the story of a man who thinks he's a woman, who dates a man who has transferred or transformed into a woman. So they're transgender, lesbian, gays. All right, so yeah, you can understand why I'm not sure if you have to be female to be a woman there for a second. If you're a single woman and you're driving down the road in the dark of the night, don't stop and pick up the stranger. All right, use some common sense. But at the same time, it's broad daylight. There's 5 of you in the car. There are people all over you. It doesn't hurt to stop and extend some courtesy. Jesus had the ability to strip away tradition and custom and human cords and see the heart, see the person. And if I'm going to be like Him, I have to see people. We talked about the gospel this morning. If you are not a child of God, that's that first division in Paul's letter to Thessalonica. If you have not heard to believe and repented of your sins, confessed Him before men, and been baptized for the forgiveness of sins, now's your opportunity. Don't miss it. No idea how many more times it's going to roll back around. If you're a child of God, the question tonight is, do you see people or do you see the mat as we stand and sing?